Hi, I'm Charlie. I'm the Creative Director and Head of Services, and I'm joined by my colleagues across video, tech, client services and digital.
And obviously in social media it's prevalent where brands are talking, and I suppose over the last few years a lot of it has been kind of broadcast news. But how are you going to get cut through over the next 5 to 10 years, or shorter time frame than that, being seen through other people's voices? So we've been talking a lot about influencers and influencer marketing, but also kind of more closer to the field from a B2B perspective is employee advocacy and finding people of influence who can talk about your brand, potentially internally, potentially some external influencers as well, people within the industries. So I think it's a really interesting point where brands now need to be seen through other voices and to be heard.
Finding those ambassadors that can go and represent your brand, but how? Because a lot of people now is finding the influence market or the influence industry a little bit disingenuine.
Yeah,
well.
I suppose it's the terminology, and you kind of probably think around this might be just semantics, but I think it's slightly different to that. But I suppose influencers, and people have a negative perception of the use of the word influencers, but there's something nice about content generators or brand ambassadors. I mean, content generators in particular, I think is potentially more appropriate, especially for the clients that we work with in the built environment. How can we identify potentially internal advocates or internal content creators who can talk around the brand or talk around projects that they're working on.
There's an argument around that, isn't there, as whether user-generated content will overtake the role of the traditional influencer in years to come because of the ability it has to get a full scope of opinion and sentiment from their audience, rather than just the ambassadorship through that influencer or group of influencers that the business uses.
Yes, definitely. But I feel it's a little bit of a difference, like between like organic search, organic SEO, like organic search, and pay-per-click. You could be querying for the same keywords, but the ones that are kind of pay for it appear at the top, and the ones that are kind of organic, they're still on the first page.
But then that leads you to a whole different topic of what is authenticity and the role inauthentic authenticity has to play in the building of those profiles. Because in a world where we want everything, we appear to want everything to be raw and truthful and real, that's when it's positive. People don't always want real, authentic and raw. How do you encourage people to bring influencers and kind of offset that against the risk of we've all seen how influencing can go wrong. How do we encourage brands that, you can still do this? It feels risky, but it's not.
Well, so I guess we've been talking on a macro level, but actually if you start to kind of narrow the search and think about kind of micro or nano influencers and finding people with credibility, I think that's the key to it all, really, isn't it? It's about authentic credibility. When you start talking with your directors or your executive and you build out employee advocacy programs and they start talking about your brand and about the company and about the projects that they're doing. And we know that the platforms don't want people to go off their platform to another website. So it kind of comes down to that employee advocacy, identifying the influencers who can help elevate your brand and kind of discuss around key points, whether it's net zero sustainability, new homes, carbon footprint, etc., etc. Identifying those people internally who have the credibility to talk about your brand on those subjects, and then building up that kind of content program with them.
There is a risk of brands talking at people instead of talking to people. So how many posts do we see from the brands or the businesses that we follow that actually respond back to customers and clients? And it comes down to the importance of engagement with your audiences. But I think sometimes there is a lack of understanding that social media isn't a bulletin board.
We do a lot of social audits, and what we're seeing is when we humanize our brands, that's when we get the best engagement, because essentially people like talking to people and engaging with people, and they don't want to talk to a business. There are people behind that business, and that is what gets the best engagement, when you're seeing real people, even if it's a photo of their face or it's face to camera. That's what gets the real engagement, when you humanize that brand.
And this kind of comes back to how bots or AI, how are they going to be able to give the perception of brand personality? So when you build a brand, the best way to bring it to life is to imagine it has a personality, like almost as if it was a person.
For me, I think it's about working smarter, not harder, and working alongside the bots and the AI. I mean, the example that we brought out earlier is really kind of relevant at the moment, and it's been in the news massively over the last kind of month or so. And I guess in the future, like if we start deploying those technologies and the AI to write posts, to write social content, to essentially kind of take on your brand personality and use that via conversational AI, how are we going to manage that? And I think there's got to be a lot of human management, and there's certainly an element that the AI machines can work with us, but it's about that management and ensuring everything is done with that human connection rather than just the AI.
And I think Twitter is probably the most authentic social media platform at the moment. There's a lot of free speech on there.
The good, the bad and the ugly of it,
dangerous
definitely.
content, but like I say, I love Twitter. I love going on there to see all these interactions, and I love the brand interactions as well.
Yeah, some brands are really
when
good.
you
Some are
get
bad, but
Kellogg's
some are
talking
really
to-
good.
Yeah, what is next for social media?
He's obviously started this new subscription model where everyone can have a blue tick. Obviously, it comes with benefits, not just the blue tick. So it'd be interesting to see where he takes it and how people adapt to it, definitely.
It's a really interesting point in terms of what the future holds for social media in general and Twitter. I suppose his vision is around like how he can create the WeWork of the West, and WeWork being that universal application. And it's kind of a really funny point. Will it work? But who? I suppose if there is going to be a universal application, who would actually own it? Is it Meta, Apple, Twitter,
Amazon?
Because that's the thing, isn't it? The whole social media element is not much. I think someone said it, people said it, it's not an engineering problem. It's a people issue. It's a community issue. It's a social issue. Hence, social media. Nick has done before, like the Tesla and so on. But those are engineering problems. This one is a pretty much people. So we'll see how. But still, if people suddenly just find something else that can fill that Twitter niche, they'll go and won't come back. When they go, they won't come back.
Well, look at how much of a struggle Snapchat had to take off, and yet TikTok's come in and just completely overtaken to a point where it's been so rapid that businesses are still trying to find a way of using that platform. So things can just suddenly appear, and I don't know what drives that, whether it's an inherent understanding of the audiences or if it's just natural progression.
I think it's progression and growth. How do you grow a platform like that? So before TikTok, you had Vine, where you had to create
Good old
7-second
Vines.
videos. That was so popular, and then it just
Disappeared. It died.
disappeared because they couldn't maintain the growth. They didn't know how to take it to its next level, and then TikTok took over, and look at it, it's huge.
So what is the big difference then between Vine and TikTok? Is it timing? Is it where TikTok succeeded, where Vine failed?
Initially, it was all about music. So it was you would create dances, or you would lip sync to like music tracks and post that. And there was a huge kind of gap in the market for that specific like area. They saw how popular it became, and then they kind of opened the platform up for all video content.
But it's still that short form and straight discovery, isn't it? It's really hard to search something. You put your topics and the feed is just there, and you go one from another.
Literally
It gives you.
swipe up to the next
That's why the
video.
engagement is so
I
high.
use TikTok for the user-generated content because it's much more authentic, credible. So I am using it much more for reviews. So I think it's an interesting space for brands to promote their products and services. I think it boils down to the attention span.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is getting shorter and shorter and shorter.
But the volume of content vying for that attention is just growing. So how do you cut through that? And a lot of that boils down to really understanding what your audience is and why they should even care about what you're trying to talk about. And if you can get those two things right, you can cut through that. So from what's next in social media, naturally I think it leads us quite nicely into talking about the metaverse. Who wants to start this one?
I've been reading a lot about the metaverse recently, and I think it's a huge topic, and that's starting to be talked over social media and across the internet. But essentially, it's this like a 3D space where you can create, share, collaborate, and explore virtual worlds. It's a really interesting topic in terms of like where we are now with it being baby steps to where it will be in the future. So we're already starting to see this through the likes of virtual reality and gamification.
I think it's interesting how brands are starting to take, I suppose, those baby steps into the metaverse at the moment. I think I read around Nike at the moment where you can design and then sell your Nike shoes in the metaverse.
Yeah.
Like what will the future hold? Obviously brands such as Mini and car brands have started exploring building their own immersive spaces, which is a really interesting thing for brands to do. And I was kind of pondering on this and wondering for the future of the built environment and the type of clients that we have, like what do they do in the metaverse and how can they start kind of building their own footprint and their digital ecosystem in the metaverse? Is it setting up buildings? Is it kind of showcasing almost like a planning consultation, but actually showcasing a building in the metaverse as a way to kind of interact and engage with your public?
I think that's Facebook big kind of bet, isn't it? Trying to develop that for companies. They're trying to do corporate first, so people to go to the offices in the metaverse. I think Microsoft Teams is going to integrate it with the new headsets next year.
It's like, where does it end? Because you'd have digital storefronts, digital employees.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? Like, where does it end?
Think like how phones have changed our lives.
Yeah.
Is this the next step? Are we all going to be walking around or sitting with these headsets on?
If they get to a point, something that is more realistic, more real life like, I think that would be more interesting.
I think with the emergence of 360 cameras, it will give people these experiences. I mean, it might not, whether you can smell it. With our previous conversation on inclusivity, like VR headsets and 360 cameras, you can potentially take anyone anywhere in the world to experience different things. So it's obviously a way of bringing inclusion into the online space, but how can they make it more realistic than what we've currently got?
I think that's the thing, right, is that you've got to think about all the senses. Yeah, at first glance, it feels like it's a very visual, hearing, orientated world. So for me personally, the first kind of step for good that something like the metaverse can have is that educational value. So if you're studying astrology or the solar system, being able to immerse yourself in an environment that you would never be able to actually physically go, or deep sea, things like that, I think that is so unbelievably beneficial. The benefits that you could have in a medical environment, for instance, there are during COVID there were companies that were using virtual headsets to help train medical students in different things because COVID made it impossible to be in situ.
Yeah, I think that's it. This metaverse is not here to replace real life. It's probably saying it's to replace the internet. It's to, instead of going online and going to our laptop and just browse a website, we will go and get our headset and go on the metaverse to do our shopping, to meet our friends, to watch some videos.
Is there a positive to it, like not for the human race essentially, but if we're spending more time in virtual scenarios and worlds, does that mean we're going to have less of a carbon footprint on the real world?
Not necessarily.
As long as they're carbon neutral environments that they set up, because I guess that was a topic that we were going to discuss today, was around kind of the net zero creative function, and especially website and digital, like essentially how heavy are your web pages, how heavy are those digital experiences that you're building, because they could be huge carbon footprints in themselves.
I think one of the criticisms to things like NFT is the footprint, the carbon footprint that they may have, because before you had something digital and you just shared that and there's hardly anything. Now you're signing it and giving an ownership that requires a higher server capacity and resources just to sign that ownership. So there's a bigger footprint on an element that was not different to the same element that doesn't have that ownership. So is that all of that though blockchain technology and those semantic AIs require a lot more capacity, which at the time will require a lot more energy, but at the time requires clean energy. Otherwise, we're doing exactly what we're doing now. So I think it all needs to root down to we need to find better renewable energy sources to be able to do that.
I was reading somewhere that 1.7 grams of carbon is used every time you load a web page.
It's insane, yeah.
I can't really compute what that means, but 1.7 grams feels like a lot every time, and obviously the
You
higher.
think how many
think how-
people
yeah.
are loading.
And how many
web pages.
pages you go through. Yeah. So, interesting way to segue into carbon neutrality and creativity. There is an argument around creativity and carbon neutrality that the actual physical footprint of creativity and carbon neutrality is actually quite low in comparison to the, and it's a phrase that's been termed brain print that creativity has, that then encourages consumers to consume and buy and collect whatever it may be through brands, that then leads to those big carbon footprint impacts. So for instance, luckily it's a bit before my time, and probably you guys as well, but when smoking first was on the scene, it was linked to sex appeal. So the creative brain print that had on leading people to smoke, which then led to carbon footprint, health issues, etc., actually stems from, in the most kind of crudest form, the creative idea.
The Marlboro Man.
The Marlboro Man. Travel as well. Travel is still to a point deemed as an escapism. So, the advertising and the promotion behind traveling encourages people that, you can get away from it all if you jump on a plane. And you can link it to so many different things. So fast food, marketed in a sense that it provides you with like happiness. Fast food makes you feel good. I mean, it doesn't ultimately, especially if you overindulge. Cars, having a big flash car means you're successful, but you can take some of those really big, impactful products or services that we use today and link them back to a creative idea that has then instilled that mentality in people needing it to consume, to be successful, to be sexy, or whatever it is, and then it's led to the issues that we currently have. But actually, what's that longer term picture looking like? How does a business get to net zero? Things like that. We're lucky that we work with clients that are very conscious about that, and that's what they're all driving towards. It's kind of like they're working against each other. So you've got one side really driving it, and then actually these new consumer trends that are hindering it. And how do we curb those consumer trends or guide them to have more economically and environmentally conscious procedures?
So the net zero has been quite a big topic for a while now. Do you think next year we're going to be more about being carbon negative or putting things back, good gases back into the environment rather than just offsetting what you're doing? Because the offsetting has a weird kind of background now with the not actual offsetting. You know what I mean? It's a lot of greenwashing and companies saying that they're doing it. They are becoming net zero. But
I think we need to, definitely. I think companies that say we're planting X amount of trees to offset our carbon, I think it's rubbish. Like, how long does it take a tree to grow to full maturity to be able to bring in that carbon? And you need like millions of trees. So I think it's just one little step. And can we even track the amount of trees that these companies are planting?
I think someone was cracking out the numbers. Like for the amount of carbon we generate globally yearly, if we try to offset that by just planting trees, there's not enough land in the earth to do that just by offsetting. So offsetting by planting trees is not a solution. we have to reduce.
We see that with one of our clients, so it's all around reducing the carbon footprint, and they're a travel management company. So as part of their new app updates, their consumers who are traveling for business purposes can now track their carbon footprint on the mode of travel they're taking. So if you're due to fly, it will give you an alternative route to travel by train, and it will show you how much you're actually saving on your carbon footprint.
That's a good, yeah,
so I
that's
think
a good plan.
there's an educational piece there for consumers. You do have your eco-conscious consumers, but you also have a lot of consumers who need that educational piece. And these brands are really starting to hone in on that and educating their customers.
I think it's a cumulative effort, isn't it? The next 5 to 10 years are going to obviously be pretty definitive, but like in terms of like the baby steps that we take at small technological advances like that give consumers a different option. It's the carbon offsetting, but as part of a bigger picture and ensuring that everything is done as sustainably as possible.
If you'd like to find out more, obviously contact us via our website or email. The information will be at the end of this discussion. Join us next time on Lovebytes.